Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're looking at a really significant global event, the passing of Pope Francis on April 21st, 2025. He was 88.
Yes, a truly pivotal moment. And it immediately triggers the process for electing his successor, the Papal Conclave.
Exactly. And this is relevant for so many reasons, especially for those of you tracking current affairs, perhaps for UPSC preparation. It's got huge implications.
Definitely. We've been looking at recent reporting. The Hindu has some good coverage, which listeners might want to check out. It helps understand this intersection of, well, ancient tradition and very modern global politics.
Right. Forget a dry lecture. Think of it as this intense mix, ritual, spirituality, but also, let's be honest, some serious strategic thinking inside the Vatican.
So our aim today is to unpack it for you. The rules, the different groups or viewpoints within the College of Cardinals, the shifting power dynamics, and the big issues they'll be grappling with.
Basically giving you the context you need to understand what's happening and why it matters on a global scale.
So first off, the moment the Pope dies, we enter the sede vacante period.
The vacant seat.
Precisely. Day-to-day administration falls to a cardinal called the Camerlengo, but his authority is quite restricted. The real focus is preparing for the conclave.
And that preparation, it follows a strict set of rules.
Very strict. It's all governed by an apostolic constitution called Universi Dominici Gregis. Let's call it UDG.
UDG. Okay, so the official playbook. What are the main things UDG dictates?
Well, a huge emphasis is on secrecy and isolation. The idea is to shield the cardinal electors from any outside pressure. They're basically sequestered within Vatican City.
Locked down, essentially, to allow for, what, prayer and focus?
That's the intention. Prayerful discernment, free from external lobbying or, media noise.
And who actually gets to vote? Is it every single cardinal?
No, that's a key point. Only cardinals who are under 80 years old on the day the papacy became vacant can vote.
Under 80. So some cardinals are there, but don't cast a ballot.
Exactly. But those older cardinals, the ones over 80, they still play a role. They participate in what are called the general congregations before the conclave starts.
Ah, so pre-conclave discussions.
Yes, they discuss the state of the church, the challenges, the kind of leader needed. Their experience means they can still have significant influence even without a vote. They're sometimes called great electors.
Interesting. So experienced voices shaping the debate. And the actual voting happens, famously, in the Sistine Chapel.
That's right, the Sistine Chapel, doors locked. It underscores the solemnity and the isolation of the whole process.
And to get elected, a candidate needs
A two-thirds majority of the votes from the electors present.
2/3. That's quite high. Why such a large majority?
It's deliberately high to encourage consensus. It pushes them to find a candidate who can command broad support, not just someone backed by a narrow faction. The aim is unity, or at least preventing deeper divisions.
Okay, that makes sense. Now, speaking of divisions, we often hear about different camps or viewpoints within the College of Cardinals. What are the main lines we should be aware of?
Well, the most common way it's framed is, broadly speaking, reformists or progressives versus conservatives or traditionalists. But, these are very wide labels.
Sure, individuals are more complex. But for understanding the general dynamics.
Okay, so the reformist progressive side often aligns with the priorities we saw under Pope Francis. That means a focus on pastoral theology, applying faith to people's real lives.
So things like social justice.
Yes, social justice, climate action, migration, maybe greater inclusion for women or LGBTQ plus Catholics. Kind of an outward-looking church engaging with modern issues.
And the conservative traditionalist perspective.
They tend to emphasize continuity. So traditional liturgy, clear doctrine, maybe wanting a return to certain pre-Francis norms. Upholding established moral teachings is usually a key focus. Concern about, perhaps, dilution of core beliefs.
So quite different priorities there. But what about cardinals from outside Europe or North America? The global South Africa, Asia, Latin America. Do they fit neatly into these boxes?
That's a really crucial point. Often they don't. You might find cardinals from, say, Africa holding quite conservative views on social issues.
Like we saw with some reactions to fiducia supplicans, the document on blessing.
Exactly. But those same cardinals might be incredibly passionate advocates for social justice, fighting poverty, dealing with environmental issues firsthand. Their experience with interreligious dialogue also shapes them. It makes their voting much harder to predict based on those simple labels.
Right. It adds a whole other layer of complexity. And Pope Francis actively appointed more cardinals from these regions, didn't he?
He did. It was a very deliberate effort to make the College of Cardinals reflect the global face of Catholicism. moving away from the historical dominance of Europeans.
Do we have a sense of the numbers now? The geographical breakdown?
Roughly, yes. Europeans are now around 39% of the electors, down from over 50% back in 2013. Asia Pacific is up to about 17%, Latin America around 15–16%, Africa around 13%. It's a significant shift.
Wow, quite a rebalancing. What does that mean for the conclave itself?
It means the concerns and perspectives of the Church in the Global South are likely to carry much more weight. Issues like poverty, migration, conflict, interfaith relations, these are lived realities for many of these cardinals.
And it increases the chances of a non-European pope.
Definitely increases the possibility. But more fundamentally, it means anyone hoping to be elected pope needs to build bridges, create coalitions across these diverse regional groups to get that two-thirds majority. You can't rely on just one bloc anymore.
So given these different viewpoints and the changing geography, what are the actual issues likely to dominate the discussions inside the Sistine Chapel?
Several big ones. Synodality is huge. Pope Francis's push for a more listening, consultative church. Some see it as vital renewal, others worry it undermines the hierarchy. That debate will be central.
A fundamental question about church governance. What else?
Well, LGBTQ plus issues, certainly. The backlash to fiducia supplicans really highlighted the tension between pastoral outreach and sticking to traditional doctrine. That's not going away.
And the role of women.
Also very prominent. Growing calls for more inclusion, discussions about women deacons, for instance. That's definitely on the table.
Are there other long-standing internal church debates likely to surface?
Oh, yes. Things like clerical celibacy always come up. Debates around bioethics are ongoing, too. And crucially, the sexual abuse crisis.
Still a major concern, even with reforms.
Absolutely. Despite reforms like Vos Estis Lux Mundi, there's continued pressure for more transparency, real accountability, and better support for survivors. Any potential pope's record and stance on this will be heavily scrutinized.
And looking outwards. Geopolitical challenges? Yeah. Internal Vatican issues?
Both. The next pope inherits a world with major conflicts: Ukraine, Gaza. Then there's the very delicate relationship with China, especially the Vatican-China agreement. And internally, continuing the financial reforms, dealing with the fallout from things like the London property scandal, it's a massive agenda.
It really sounds like an incredibly complex job description. So with all this diversity and these challenges, how predictable is this conclave likely to be? Are there clear frontrunners?
Most observers are saying this one is particularly unpredictable, much more so than some recent conclaves where you maybe had one or two obvious candidates heading in.
Why so uncertain this time?
It's partly that diversity we talked about. Many cardinals appointed by Francis might not know each other well personally. They come from very different contexts. And then there's the secrecy. It really works. You don't know what alliances are forming or how minds are changing until that white smoke appears.
Isn't there an old Vatican saying about this? Something about entering as pope.
Yes, exactly. He who enters the conclave as pope leaves it as a cardinal. It highlights that unpredictability. Often, the leading candidates going in get blocked by opposing factions.
And then a compromise candidate emerges.
Precisely. Someone perhaps less prominent initially, but acceptable to a wider range of electors. It happens quite often.
So it really is this unique mix, political calculation, personal faith, maybe something more spiritual, all happening behind those locked doors.
That sums it up well. It's a process demanding serious attention, especially, as you said, for those needing to understand global affairs and institutions.
Okay, so let's try and wrap up this deep dive.
Yeah.
We've covered the rules, the UDG, the secrecy, the voting. We've looked at the main ideological currents, progressive, conservative, and that crucial global south dimension. We've seen how the geography of the college has shifted. And we've touched on the huge range of issues: synodality, social questions, the abuse crisis, geopolitics.
It's a complex picture, showing how the election will shape the Catholic Church's future direction, which, given its size and influence, has global consequences. Understanding this is definitely valuable context for anyone, including UPSC aspirants looking at global social and political dynamics.
Absolutely. It's a fascinating study in tradition meeting modern pressures. We really encourage you to keep following this and think about the different factors involved.
And perhaps consider this. With all these challenges, this need for consensus across such diversity, what single quality do you think is most essential for the next pope?
That's a great question for our listeners to ponder. Let us know your thoughts in the comments. If you found this deep dive helpful for getting your head around this major event, especially if you're preparing for exams like the UPSC, please do like and subscribe for more explorations like this.
And as we mentioned, for more detailed background, The Hindu provided some excellent reporting that informed our discussion today. Definitely worth a read.
Thanks for joining us on the Deep Dive.